Hello there and welcome to another video from Change Tips and Tools. And today we are going to look at how we solved a challenge on resource capacity for a project manager using Power Query and Power Pivot together in Excel 365. So let me show you the challenge and how we solved it step by step. Let's do this. So here we have the Excel file, or the data that the project manager gave us, and that project manager was Jane Smith here. And we've got a number of projects from project 1 down to project 24, and we've got some project management activity. We've got the project start and we've got the project finish. We've also got Jane's capacity. So based on a 5-day week, Jane is 100% available. So that's a 40-hour working week, Monday to Friday. And then we've plotted out Jane's start date and end date to the end of 2030. We've also got the assumed allocation to the project, which is 20% of Jane's capacity. And then I've created here 2 dates here that represent our working calendar, which is from the 1st of January 24 to the 31st of December 2030. That is in line with Jane's start and finish dates here as well. And the question is, based on that allocation of Jane to these projects, based on their start and finish dates, do we have a capacity issue for Jane, and do we need to bring in additional project managers? And if so, when and how many? So that's the question we're going to answer using Power Query and Power Pivot. So the first thing I'm going to do on this data is I'm going to turn these into tables. So I'm going to highlight this area here of the project information, and this is going to be our demand data. So I'm going to do Control T for table, and yes, my table has headers. And then on the table design, I'm going to give this a meaningful name. So I'm going to go TBL and then call this demand data, and that TBL is just a reference to table. And it's always good practice to give your tables meaningful names so you know what they are. And here again, if I select anywhere in the data range, do Control T. Now what you'll notice is that it's including the top part of that, so I'm just going to change that range there, and again say that my table has headers. Click OK, and this one I'm going to call it my TBL capacity data, and hit return. I've then got here my assumed allocation, so I'm just going to select that, do Control T again and do OK with headers, and I'm going to call this table allocation, like so. And then finally I've got my calendar information, so again I'm going to select that, do Control T, do OK, and I'm going to call this TBL calendar, like so, and hit return. So now I've got all my tables. Let's start pulling this into Power Query first, because I've got to first thing I've got to do is I need to make this parameter, for want of a better word, the allocation, accessible in Power Query. So I'm going to select that cell, and on the data ribbon I'm going to select from table and range, and that opens up my Power Query window, and all I'm going to do is on that column there, that single 0.2, I'm going to right click on it and select drill down, and you'll notice now, based on doing that, it's now become 0.2, and I'm just going to call this my allocation and hit return. I'm then going to go to the home ribbon And I'm going to do close and load to drop down, and then do the close and load to, and I'm going to create a connection only there and click OK. And there we have my allocation. Now, just to make sure as well, if you do not have the Power Pivot ribbon here, which we'll need a little bit later on, and also we'll need for the next steps where we need to add things to a data model, if you don't have that ribbon there available to you, just go to File, then go down to Options, then on the Add-ins options, go to this drop down at the bottom, COM Add-ins, click the Go, and just make sure here where you've got Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel ticked. And also I have it ticked, so I don't need to click OK, so I'm just going to cancel that. But that's how you get the Power Pivot ribbon there. Anyway, let's go back. So I'm going to click the data ribbon, and I'm going to select my demand data, and again from table and range. So there you can see our table, and it automatically defaults to table demand data. I'm going to call this demand data and hit return. And as always with Power Query, each step that you take it will record. So I take the start and finish dates instead of having a date and time here. So on the home ribbon you can see data type. I'm going to change that from date and time to just date, replace current, and remember Power Query does not change the source data. Okay, and you can see there's that change type. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add a column, and I want to bring in this allocation. Yeah, and then what I want to do is get Power Query to extrapolate that out. So for project 1, we're going to go from the 9th of October 2025 to the 7th of September 2027 with an assumed allocation of 20% per working day or weekday, not weekends. And the way that we're going to do that is first I'm going to do on the add column ribbon, I'm going to do custom, and I'm going to call this demand. And I'm simply here with next to the right of the equal sign, I'm going to start typing my, and you can see my allocation comes up. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to click OK. And there you go, there you can see that 20%, 0.2. So all I'm going to do with that demand column now is I'm just going to, on the home ribbon, change that to a decimal number, like so. And again, you can see it's recording these things. The next thing we need to do is we need to extrapolate that between the start and finish date for each project. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use the list calculation. So I'm going to do add column, I'm going to do custom, I'm going to call this date. Then to the right of the equal sign, I'm going to do an open curly bracket and then type number. I'm just going to scroll down. I want number from. So I'm going to do number from, select that, do an open bracket, and then I'm going to select start and then close that bracket. So what I've just said is I want the number value from that start date, and obviously all dates are serial numbers, i.e. numbers. So we want the number from for the start of our list or our range, and I'm going to do 2 full stops to say number from the start date to number from open bracket our finish date, and close that bracket. And then I'm going to close the curly bracket. So there we've got it. I'm going to create a list of numbers starting from the start date to the finish date, and I'm going to click OK. And there's no syntax errors. As you can see, I've got the green tick. I click OK, and it's created this date column. So if I click here to the right, don't click the list, I'm going to click to the right, and you can see all these numbers that it's generated. These are date serial numbers. So what we need to do is we need to expand this out to, and I'm going to use these 2 outward facing arrows on the date column. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to expand it to new rows, like so. So now you'll notice this is duplicated. Project 1 is duplicated because it's created a row per date between the 9th of October to the 7th of December 2027. So with that column still selected, I'm just going to change the data type to a date. It's now converted those numbers to dates. So I don't need the start and finish, so I'm going to select those, and I'm going to remove those columns. And now I need to make sure that we don't work weekends, so we're not creating demand on a Saturday and a Sunday because we don't work weekends. So still with that date column selected, I'm going to do add column, and I'm going to use this add column from a date and time, and I'm going to do the drop down on date, select day, and select name of day. So we now know what this date refers to, what day of the week it is. And what I'm going to do is on the day name is I'm going to filter out the Saturday and Sunday by deselecting them and then click OK. Now I've done that, I don't need the day name any longer. As you can see, it's recording these steps. I'm going to right click on it and do remove. So I've now got my demand. And all I'm going to do is I go to the home ribbon. I'm going to do close and load to drop down, close and load to. I'm going to create a connection only, and I'm going to add it to my data model or my Power Pivot. I'm going to click that, select that, and then click OK. So now we have 13,377 rows created. Now you can't see them in a spreadsheet. If I go to the Power Pivot ribbon, go to Manage, there you can see that demand data that it's generated. If I expand that out, wonderful, and there it is. So I'm going to make the demand here, format, I'm just going to make that a decimal number. I'm going to make the date here, I'm just going to make that just a date, not a date and time. Wonderful. And then I'm just going to close that down. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same for my capacity data. So let's take Jane. So selecting that table anywhere on the data ribbon, I'm going to select from table and range. Again, I'm going to follow those same steps. So I'm going to take the start and finish. I'm going to make those just a date. Let's make the capacity a decimal number like so. I'm then going to do add column, custom column. And again, I'm going to call this date, so we're going to extrapolate that out. I'm going to do open curly bracket. Number from, open bracket, take that start date, double click on it, close the bracket, do the 2 full stops, and do number from again, open bracket, select finish, and then close that bracket, and then close the curly bracket. Again, no syntax error, click OK. I'm going to expand that out to new rows. With that still selected on the home ribbon, I'm going to make it a date. Yeah, so I don't need the start and finish now, so I'm going to remove those columns. And then again, I'm going to make sure that Jane's capacity, she doesn't work weekends, so I'm going to remove the Saturday and Sunday. So again, with the date column selected, I'm going to do add column from a date and time. I'm going to do the drop down on the date, and I'm going to select from the day, the name of day. Again, I'm going to filter that and remove the Saturday and Sunday and click OK. Again, I don't need that day name any longer. I'm going to right click on it and do remove column. So now I have Jane's capacity, and I'm going to rename this to be capacity data and hit return. I'm then going to do home, close and load 2. Again, I'm going to create a connection only and add it to my data model like so, and click OK. So there we have 1,827 rows. Yep. Now, the next thing I want to add is the calendar. So the commonality, how do I compare the capacity to the demand? The only constant between them is the date, the day. So what capacity and what demand do we have on that day? And this is where the calendar comes in. So this is my working calendar. So I'm going to select the calendar table. And again, on the data ribbon, I'm going to do from table and range. And let's extrapolate that out as well. So I'm going to highlight the 2 columns to make sure they are dates. So on the home ribbon, make them a date. I'm then going to add a column, do custom column, and that's right, I'm going to call it date. And I'm going to do the open squiggly line. So let me do that formula again. And there you go, exactly the same. And the reason why it's exactly the same is obviously I've called the fields the same thing, start and finish, just for consistency. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to expand that out and expand to new rows. That column's still selected. On the home ribbon, I'm going to make it a date. Get rid of the start and finish, don't need them any longer. Right click on them and remove columns. Again, I need to make sure the working calendar does not include weekends. So I'm going to do add column with the date selected, and again from the drop down on the date, let's get the name of day in there, and again filter and take out Saturday and Sunday by unticking them and clicking OK. Now I've done that, I don't need that any longer. I'm going to remove that column, and again on the home ribbon, I'm going to first of all let's call this calendar, get rid of the table just to be consistent. So that's now calendar, hit return, and then I'm going to do close and load 2. I'm going to create a connection only, and I'm going to add that to the data model. And there you go, 1,827 rows, which is exactly the same as the capacity data. Right, I just want to check one thing on my demand data, do edit. Yeah, I just want to make sure my demand data is a decimal number, and that is, so I'm just going to shut that down, don't need to do anything with it. So I don't need this any longer. I'm going to close down my queries and connections, and if you wanted to get that back up on the data ribbon, just click the queries and connections and it will appear. Right. Now I have got my file on auto save, so just remember to keep saving your file every so often if you don't have auto save enabled. So now that I've got my data into my data model, let's go to Power Pivot ribbon and let's select Manage. So there's my demand data with my projects. Let's go to capacity, and again I'm just going to make sure all these are the same format. So the capacity, I want to make sure that that is a decimal number format. On the date, I'm going to make sure it's just a date, not a date and time. And then on the calendar, again, just expand that, and I'm just going to make sure that is just a date as well. So now I've done that, let's do some modeling by creating some relationships between these tables. So let's connect the capacity and the demand data to the date. And the way that we do that is we go into, so on the top ribbon here, instead of data view, which we're currently in, let's go to diagram view. Let me select that. And here are our tables. So let's just move them around here like so, and there's our calendar. So I'm going to take the date from the calendar, click it, and I'm going to drag it and drop it on date in demand data. And here you can see that I've got a one-to-many relationship here. You cannot have many-to-many relationships in Power Pivot. So we've got a one-to-many relationship because there's only one instance of the 1st of January 2024 in the calendar, but there could be multiple in the demand data. And again, if I drag the date and drop it onto the capacity date, then you'll notice this is the wrong way around. You've got one in the capacity, and you've got many in the calendar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that join and do delete from model, and I'm just going to drag the date to the top and do it the other way around, and it's figured it out. Okay, so now we've got the relationships, we can now create our measures to calculate our demand, our total demand and our total capacity. So I'm going to go into the data view, and on the calendar here, because that's where we're joining everything together based on the date, is below this line here. I'm going to select a cell and I'm going to start typing, and as I start typing, this will stay blank, but you'll see in the formula bar what I'm doing. So I'm going to start typing total demand. So I'm going to do total demand, I'm going to do a colon equals, I'm then going to type sum, press the tab key to get the open bracket, so I am getting the total demand. So because we are linked to that through the date field to the date on the demand data, I can select the demand here. So demand data, demand, select, double click on that, and then close the bracket and hit return. And there you go. So that's the total demand. So there's 2,675.4 days effort demand. Yeah. So I'm going to make sure the format on that is a decimal number, like so. Then I'm going to do the same for capacity. So again, I'm going to select the cell below, start typing, and you'll see it appear up here. So I'm going to do total capacity, do colon equals, and again do sum. Open that bracket, and I want a sum of my capacity. Double click it, close that bracket, and hit return. And then I have a sum of my total capacity, and again I'm just going to make that a decimal on the format here, a decimal number, and there we go. And again I can just hit save here. I can click the Excel icon. I don't have to close Power Pivot, so I can click the Excel icon, but you'll get this warning here. So whilst you've got Power Pivot open, it will disable auto save. Yeah. So if I go into here and close this, then hit save, you'll see the auto save has come back on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another sheet. I'm going to do the plus sign. I'm going to call this, rename it my support sheet. Hit return. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the insert ribbon. I'm going to do it on the pivot table drop down. I'm going to insert a pivot table from my data model here and select that. And yes, I'm going to put it where I've got that cell selected on the existing sheet and click OK. So now you can see we've got those tables that exist within Power Pivot, and also the name of the tables as well. So this is what we've loaded through Power Query as a connection only into the data model, and these are the individual tables. So the only one I need is a calendar, so I'm going to expand it. I'm going to take the date, I'm going to drop it into my rows. Over here I'm going to, any one of these, I'm just going to right click on it. I'm going to do expand entire field, so all of them are set to expanded, like so. I don't want the date, because I only want to do this by year and quarter, so I'm going to get rid of the date and month, so I've got year and quarter there. I'm then going to take my total capacity, drop that in, and then I'm going to take my total demand and I'm going to drop that in, so you can see these numbers here, like so. Also, what I'm going to do with this pivot table still selected, and I've got pivot table analysis there, is I'm going to do insert slicer, and I'm going to choose year there on active and click OK. And all I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to, with that slicer selected, just give it a few more columns there, and let's just expand that out like so. Okay, wonderful. Yep. And I'm just going to have, for now, 2024, so I'm going to select 2024, hold down the control key, select 2025 and 2026 for the purposes of this exercise. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that pivot table, and I'm going to do insert, and I'm going to insert a line with markers. So I'm going to select that, and there's my line chart. So make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. With that still selected on the pivot chart analysis here, I'm just going to do the drop down here on the field buttons, and I'm going to do hide all because I don't want those buttons on there. I'm also going to do the plus sign, and I'm going to add some data labels, and then just shrink that down for a second. So looking at this at the moment, you can see that I've got a total demand here, yeah, and then I've got a total capacity. So I know I've got 65 days worth of capacity in quarter 1, quarter 2, and I can see what the demand is by quarter here at the bottom. But what it's not telling me is, so how many more people do I need to satisfy that? So what we need to do is create a headcount calculation. So I'm going to go back to Power Pivot. Yeah, I'm just going to deselect that there, and I'm going to go back to Power Pivot and do Manage. And let's create some more calculations. So the first thing we need to get the head count is we need to understand how many working days are available. So I'm going to create another measure called working days. I'm going to do colon equals. So this is basically going to be a count. So I'm going to do count tab. I'm just going to count the date. That's all I'm going to do. Double click that. Count the date in my calendar, hit return. So there you go. And that's a relief. We've got 1,827 days, and we've got capacity of 1,827 days, which at the moment they both run with just one person the same time period. So let's do our capacity. So what's our headcount capacity based on that? So I'm going to do capacity headcount colon equals. So the calculation to get the head count is going to be if I do this an open square bracket, you can see the measures that we've created already. So I'm going to take my capacity and I'm going to divide that open square bracket by working days, and I'm going to hit return, and we get 1. So fundamentally what that's saying, based on the capacity we have and the working days available, we have a headcount capacity of 1. Again, with that selected, I'm just going to make that a decimal number like so. So let's do the same for what's our headcount as far as demand. So I'm going to do demand headcount colon equals. So this is going to be open square bracket, take my total capacity and divide that by open square bracket the working days and hit return. And you're wondering why we got 1. Can you spot the error there? I didn't do total demand, I did total capacity. So let's just fix that. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm just literally going to click on that there, and it should change it. Boom, it's changed. And hit return again, and there you go. And again, make this a decimal number, and there you go. So far, as far as a lump value, a lump sum without taking time into account, you can see that we don't have enough capacity here to satisfy the demand. So let's plot that now. So I'm going to save that, close it down, and I'm going to remove the total demand, and I'm going to remove the total capacity. And now I'm going to take the capacity, drop that in. So I've now got the head count number. I'm then going to take the demand head count, drop that in. And now, if I just close this down here, because I don't need it open any longer, as you can see the problem. So based on the capacity, we start having problems in Q3 of 2024. And you can see the problem grows through 2025 and then drops down in 2026. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to take this, I'm going to select the label on the, I'm going to do Control 1, and all I'm going to do is make that below, so it's below the marker, and on the home ribbon I'm just going to make that 12, and I'm going to make the font this dark blue here. I'm then going to select the data labels on the demand head count, and again I'm going to, so that's above, I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to make them this orange here, make them bold, and I'm going to make them 12 also. I'm then going to close this down because I don't need it open. I'm then going to take this, select it, I'm going to do Control, in fact I'm going to put a title on this, so let's do chart title. Let's give it a meaningful title. I'm going to call it Demand versus Supply. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's move that to there. I'm going to do the plus sign here and the legend, do the arrow, and I'm just going to move it to the top. And I'm just going to drag that to the top and just drag it to there like so. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to select it, do Control X, go to my data here, and I'm just going to paste it. Let's paste it there and do Control V. I want to bring my slicers in as well so I can play with it. I'm going to do Control X. I'm going to do Control V. Let me just move this to the right so you can see. It's going to give me a warning message. Control V. I'm just going to say paste everything. Yeah, basically put a slicer. And there we go. So, looking at this, now normally within a spreadsheet you'd be doing all kinds of wonderful things, but all I'm going to do now is if we take what this is telling us, is that we can see 2024 start of Q3. Yeah. So let's add a PM to our capacity. So I'm going to go PM1. Let's start them the 1st of August. So 0108/24 for the 1st of August. And let's take that to the end of 2026. So let's do 31/12/26 and just make them 100% capacity and hit return. If I then go to the data ribbon and do refresh, I can real time then look at what that's doing to it. So refresh the data, and there you go. So now you can see my capacity is starting to move up. Now we can still see that from Q4 we still got a problem. So let's add another PM. So again I'm going to do PM2, and let's do this from the 1st of October 01, and again to the end of 2026. Let's give them 100% capacity, hit return, Let's refresh that. Okay, now we're looking like we can now meet the demand now, but we've still got problems in Q3 of 2025. So you're starting to see the power of Power Pivot and Power Query, and how easy it is to start plotting and doing some simple modelling here. So Q3 there. So let's go PM3. Let's do it from the 1st of, so it's Q3, 1st of July. And that's 2025. And then let's do it to the end of Q3. I think we're all right there, so let's do it to the 31st of July 2026. And let's do 80% allocational capacity there and hit return. If I do refresh, and there you go. So that now looks achievable. So let's look at 27, year 27 onwards. So I'm going to select 2027, 28 and 29. So we can see I need to extend, so let's extend the first PM to the end of June. So let's do June 2027, shall we say. In fact, I'm going to take it to the end of 2027. So let's change that to 27. Let's refresh that. And then let's take our PM down here, that's part-time here, down to the end of, let's say, Q3. So again, let's just take that to maybe, let's try it there like so, end of July 2027, hit return. Let's refresh that. Okay. A slight problem there in Q1, but I think we can overcome that. So if I select all the years now, like so, we've now modelled that, and we can see how we achieved that based on that 20% allocation. And the beauty of this now is that what if they turn around and say, right, well actually it's 40%, yeah, and I hit return, I refresh that, you can see what that does to the overall profile, and you can see how demand increases accordingly. Again, I can put that back to 20%, refresh it and put it back to what it was. So that is how we solved the problem or the challenge to do some simple capacity modelling for these projects. If you want to know more about Power Query or Power Pivot and how they can be of use to you, then please let me know in the comments the type of challenges that you've got at work, and I'll be happy to do a video for you. I hope you found this helpful and informative. If so, please remember to click that like, subscribe and smash that notifications button for future content. And as always, I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Please take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video from Change, Tips and Tools. Bye bye now.